resist taking this opportunity to ask you about publishing, especially since you have been published many times by different publishers. Some of your books are behind you there. So what publishing is an industry that's full of, decisions, large and small, from, shall we try to acquire a large company that's for sale, to should we acquire this book, to should we spend this money on a marketing decision to support this book. Does it strike you that publishing is a noise-infected business?
Every business in which there are judgments is noise-infected. There's nothing to be worried or ashamed about. It's not specific to publishing, and it's probably not worse in publishing than anywhere else. Here we need to distinguish between actually several things. First, there is what we call objective ignorance in the book, and that's a big deal in publishing. When you read, publishing house X, Y, and Z were completely crazy to pass on Harry Potter. Well, no, they weren't. It was very, very hard to predict that Harry Potter would be such a runaway success. In fact, if it hadn't been that hard, they wouldn't have passed. If it had been an easy call, every one of the first publishing house that got the manuscript would have said, well, that's an easy one. What makes it so difficult to predict is that it's a complete outlier, and predicting outliers is by definition difficult. When in hindsight we say they were stupid to pass on it, we completely forget this dimension of unpredictability, of objective ignorance when you make judgments. So that's the first thing that publishing is a very good metaphor for, or a very good illustration of, I should say. In any judgment that we make, we will never be perfect. We will make a lot of mistakes because the world is uncertain and unpredictable. And what we're trying to do when we make a judgment is to be, on average, right more often than wrong. We're trying to improve the odds of every one of our decisions being right. So, first thing to bear in mind, before we even talk about noise and bias and error, we're never going to be perfect. The world is unpredictable. Second, when you're making the decision to publish a book, what actually are you deciding? Are you deciding that this book is going to sell X copies and therefore it's a good deal? Or are you making a judgment that this book must be published because it's an important voice in the debate on this particular topic and is the mission of this publishing house to publish a book like this? Or is it a mixture of those two things, as it probably is? And that actually makes those judgments quite interesting, because if you were just saying, we think this book is going to sell 53,265 copies, and therefore it's a good book, that would be a very simple, in a way, predictive judgment, where we could measure how accurate you've been, and this would essentially become a prediction game. What you are in fact doing, being a reputable publisher, and not just someone who wants to print a lot of copies, is an evaluative judgment where you are weighing a number of inputs, including a prediction of the success of a book, of course. You don't want to publish a book that no one is going to read, but also including quality judgments about that book and its contribution. And in your weighing of these different attributes, you are making what we call an evaluative judgment, which is a trickier judgment and a more interesting one. And there is a lot of noise in those kinds of evaluative judgments, which is why there is a lot of noise in publishing. And that's a good thing for aspiring authors who can hope that they at least will find an outlier in all this noise.
Hachette,